They say that Social Security will run out in less than a decade. Is that true? Are we at risk because of that? Well, that's bad news for you. It's even worse news for your kids and your grandkids. Well, forget about it. Tell you what, there's something you can do to head this off at the pass, at least in your own family. It just might turn your children or grandchildren into middle class millionaires. What's the secret and how can you do it? We're going to find that out on this week's version of the State of Greater Western New York Report, which, as always, is brought to you by.
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard.
The Menden Honeoye Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Well, how about that for a little delay? Hopefully, you were anticipating with excitement what we're going to be talking about today. So it's a very interesting topic, and it's something that has been discussed on other podcasts, other shows. A lot of misinformation, a lot of things that maybe push you a little bit too far, get you a little bit too excited, and maybe even think that this is something I can do. It's really easy. Not necessarily true, but maybe it is. Or this is something I can't do. It's totally impossible. That's probably not true, although it might be. Are you totally confused yet? That's right. This is going to be a discussion about, can you put your 2-year-old on your payroll? But wait, it's really about something much more than that. So, what we're going to be talking about right now is something that's a little bit more important than just putting your 2-year-old on payroll, because not everybody can do that. But everybody can do this. What is it? It's about putting your child in an IRA. And what are the benefits of doing that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today, and that's what you're going to explore over the next half hour. So let's get right to it. What are the benefits of putting your child into a Roth IRA? Because primarily that's what you would be putting them in. If you look at it, you can actually create multimillionaires out of your children just by using a child IRA. Now, did that $1 million number grab your attention? Yeah, it's important. But before we get to that, there's something that's much more important that you might enjoy hearing. Let's start off with this idea. Self-confident kids are more successful. If you're like most parents, you might want to help your children. You want to help them to avoid making the same mistakes you've made. You want to give them an edge they can only get from experience, from your experience. You, like any other parent, want to see your children have the benefit of self-sufficiency and the self-confidence that usually comes with that at an earlier age than you did, in fact. Why? Because the sooner you see your child, your children, forge confidently ahead for themselves, the more content and relaxed your life becomes. Get that? If your kids are going to be self confident and successful, you'll actually be more relaxed. That's a good thing. Now, face it, your kids have been they've kept you awake at night from the moment they were first born. Even adult children keep their parents awake. You've learned from the school of hard knocks how to make good decisions. Offering this knowledge can help your children. But alas, how many kids listen to their parents? It's natural to convince them that there's no way your kids will ever listen to you. Well, it's natural to convince yourself that. You don't have to convince them that. They'll convince themselves of that. But it is quite easy to convince yourself that there's no way to get your kids to listen to you, especially if your kids are teenagers. And if they don't listen to you, there's no way you can share those hard lessons you've learned from your life's experiences. That's life. There's nothing you can do about it. Or can you? Look around you. Other parents' children appear on the road to success. How did they do it? Believe it or not, you already know the answer. The answer lies in your response to this question. How old were you when you first started to learn from your? If you're like most offspring, you eventually realized your parents offered you valuable advice. You only wish you'd listened to them earlier. This is one of those good news, bad news sort of things. Rest assured, at some point, your kids will seek your counsel. That's the good news. The bad news is, like you, they'll have to relearn everything you did by attending their own school of hard knocks. So, the challenge is giving them that edge you want to give them. It's true the challenge may be insurmountable. You may not be able to give your children a head start in every endeavor, but you might be able to do it in at least one area. Would you settle for guiding them to an opportunity that they can ignore today? Get it? They can ignore it today, but will definitely be thankful for it when they're your age. It's the kind of thing they'll look back on and say to themselves, boy, am I glad my parents did that for me. I might not have understood or appreciated it back then, but I sure do now. Of course, if you take a moment to reflect on it, you'd have wished your parents had the foresight to do this for you, too. So, too many outside influences draw your kids away. This is why you want to do something that really they don't have to pay attention. What are the sort of things that kind of influence them? Hollywood brainwashes them to distrust you. Schools train them to think independently, but without the common sense guidelines life has taught you. Their peers convince them they are invincible. Heck, by the time you get a chance to talk to them, society has swayed your kids to believe anything you tell them is holding them back. So go ahead. Tell them the one thing they can do right now that will guarantee to make them more comfortable later in life. You know what it is. It's not an opinion. You've seen it work, at least in others, and hopefully in your own life. But tell them till you're blue in the face. Chances are, unless you start well before they're inundated by these Hollywood or outside influencers, they're going to ignore you, just like every other child ignores every other parent. So, if you focus on the one thing you can control from the moment your child is born, you can set the seeds that will grow to become a powerful force in your child's favor. How powerful? Consider this. Kids from an early age like to win. They all dream of being the best player on the team. Now, life is filled with many different types of games. When you're young, those games are mostly physical. As we grow older, though, our games become increasingly fiscal. It's not just expensive looking goods, whether it's clothes or computers or cars. Sure, it might start out that way, but the scoreboard eventually becomes earnings and savings. Earnings lead to these expensive looking things, but savings represent the ultimate measure of wealth. When our children feel wealthy, their self esteem increases. And with self esteem, invariably comes that self confidence I was talking about. And self confidence, when directed correctly, quickly leads to success in any number of fields. When an outsider can effectively influence a child who already believes himself, what happens? Well, what outsider can really do that? Moreover, how many self confident children have you seen fearlessly take on the altar of the politically correct establishment? Yeah, if they're confident in themselves, they're not going to let anybody put peer pressure on them. You can be certain of one thing. With this kind of inner strength, your kids won't be drinking someone else's Kool-Aid. They'll be pouring their own that others will drink. That, what's more, they'll be doing it at a younger age than their peers, and that will make them leaders. And when you're old, imagine how much more buoyant and cheerful you'll be, knowing that your kids can get by on their own, how they're prepared to help their own kids benefit from their, and by extension, your experience. Now, that's a legacy you can retire on. And if your kids have missed out on this opportunity, don't worry. You can always focus on your grandkids. So that lays down the foundation of what we're going to be talking about. It's really the Child IRA, and it's really something that is quite powerful. Let's go over it very quickly in terms of what maybe you can expect to see out of it, maybe what some of the obstacles are and how you can get over them, at least the easy ones to get over. So, what is a child IRA? Child IRA is essentially a minor IRA or a custodial IRA. Banks and brokerage firms where you have to go to get these things, they're a little bit different. They call them a little bit different at each firm, but it's basically a child IRA. And what it does is it utilizes the advantage of compounding, the power of compounding. Now, the examples I'm about to show you assume below average return by about 3%. So I'm going to assume that you're a really bad investor. And I'm also going to tell you up front, there's an obstacle to doing this, the child labor law. So the child has to be old enough to work in order for you to set up a child IRA, because a child IRA can only be set up through working. Now, next year we're going to get into 529 plans, being able to convert those, but that's 15 years away. So it'll start next year, but the 529 plans have to have been in existence for 15 years. But we're going to assume you're not using that to establish a child IRA. You're using more traditional methods, which means that your child has to work. So let's start off with teenagers. So teenagers are the ones who can work. I mean, basically state laws, child labor laws are by state. There's federal government. You can start depending on what state you live in, either at the age of 13 or the age of 14. So let's assume that you start off at the age of 13 and work through the age of 18, and you make $6,000 a year, which isn't really that difficult if you work full time during the summer and then part time for the rest of the year. Easy to get that amount. Now, money for the IRA contribution can come from anywhere as long as the child's wage earnings are at least this $6,000. So the child could say make $6,000 a year, spend $3,000 on goodies, and use the other $3,000 to put into the IRA. Well, wait, you're $3,000 short. Where does that other $3,000 come from? Well, it could come from the parents, grandparents, whatever, as gifts. So you can get to that $6,000 total. Well, let's say you do this. So all you're going to do is you're going to invest $6,000 a year into a child IRA from age 13 through age 18, and then do nothing and be a bad investor. How much will that grow to? Well, it turns out that at age 70, that child IRA, which just had about $36,000 of original investment, has now grown to 2.6 million. So, age 70, because that's probably going to be the retirement age by the time your child retires, doing nothing, not even putting any more money in, $2.5 million, exceeding that amount. That's a good head start for retirement. That doesn't even include the retirement savings that the child will have once the child starts working. So this is a great head start. Now, what do you say for the states that don't allow children to work until they're age 14? Well, let's look at that. So age 14, again through age 18, now we're upping the annual contribution to $6,500, which is the limit or the cap that you can put in every year into an IRA. So again, the money has to come from, well, it could come from anywhere, but the child has to have wage earnings of at least 6,500. So from the age 14 to the age 18, you put in $6,500 a year, and what do you get? Well, here you have 2.25 million at age 70. Still a multimillionaire by the time the child retires. That's pretty impressive number if you stop and think about it, and it's something that is done relatively easy. You don't have to do any sort of changes to the way that the child lives or works, because we're assuming the child is going to be working as a teenager. That's really the only requirement, that the child have a job. And it could be a job from anywhere. It could be the local grocery store. It could be your own company. It could be selling newspapers or whatever, or a lemonade stand. I guess it's hard to get $6,000 if you've got a neighborhood lemonade stand. But hopefully they've got something where they're getting at least the amount of money that you're going to want to contribute to the Child IRA. So that's a beginning. Now there's a little bit of a twist. Now, if you want to get younger children to invest in a Child IRA, can you get around the child labor law? What loopholes are there? We're going to talk about those after this break. All right, so welcome back, everyone. You're watching this week's version of the State of Greater Western New York Report. We're talking about child IRAs and how you could turn your child into a multi-millionaire fairly effortlessly, really, when you think about it. I mean, at least from a teenage standpoint, it's not that hard. But the challenge becomes, what about my younger children? You saw from that ad what happens if you start investing when the child is just born, and that's possible. It's possible to do that. We're going to talk about that. But first, there's something that's, again, it's more important than the numbers. And we want to go over those again. Think about this. You've got a young child, and you might have your own business, say. What does it mean to maybe combine the idea of a child IRA with the fact that you own? So let's take a look at those things and see what kind of impact it have. So it's really about achieving the dreams of every parent and grandparent. And what is it? It's more than just the numbers. You work hard. You work hard on your business. You work hard for your family. After all, it isn't your family. It is your family. It is your family that it's all about. And that's why you're living your dream of running a family owned business. There's no reason to spend all that blood, sweat, and tears only to give all the profits to someone else. No, you're doing it for your family. You want them to enjoy the fruits of your labors, and it's a legacy you've spent your entire life building. And you'll rest easy knowing that you've built for your family something that will ultimately stay in your family. That's really what the goal is. But you can't control the future. You can't control your customers. You can't control your competitors. And at times, you lack the control that just of everything. And that just gets the better of you. So it's only natural to question if it's worth the effort. There's no guarantee your business will last long enough for you to spend your retirement joyfully watching as your kids take the reins. All that hard work just to give your kids an edge you never had, and you had little to no control if you'll ever get there. So worse, you can't even control your kids. If they're like most kids, the last thing they'll want to do is take over the family business. No, they've grown up in a world that's teaching them to do their own thing wherever they want to do it. Heck, if you're lucky, they'll stay living in the same city, let alone working in the business that you created. And yet, as you see other family businesses spanning multiple generations, something convinced the children of those parents to stick around and, when the time came, join the family business. Just what did those parents do? What encouraged those kids to shun that continual barrage from, the do your own thing? What made them stay close to home while their peers were lured to faraway jobs, rarely returning to the land of their roots? Something. And there's a way for you to capture that. What is it? Well, first, before you do that, you need to know your competition. And it's not the same competition you face with your customer or for your customer. No, the enemy here is all around. It never stops. You can try to build a protective shield around your children, but the lure's too great, even for you. You don't want your children to live a sheltered life. You want them to become worldly. By doing so, though, you expose them to a culture that demands they reject everything you've worked hard for. You want them to embrace your family values, but you'd feel better if they made that decision on their own. Society, on the other hand, has its own agenda, and it's not looking out for your best interests. Yet, every song your child listens to, every television show your child watches, every film your child goes to see lures your child further away from you. And you can't rely on school either. Sure, teachers and counselors are great at teaching your kids to dream, but they know nothing of your dream. Worse, they tell your own children they don't have to burden themselves with their parents' dreams, their family value. They tell your kids they have a right, a duty, indeed an obligation to think for themselves. You can't argue with them. You want it too. But you also want your kids to make their choices within the context of the greater good of the family, not merely for some hedonistic joy. The enemy you face is much bigger than you, but even David beat Goliath. For all the strength of Achilles, there was that small, vulnerable heel. Your children might be exposed to a nonstop bombardment of all of society's many temptations, but you have something society can never offer. It has the internet, the media, and the entertainment industry. You have the dinner table and something a bit more enticing. You have your own business. You may think of this business merely as a means to put food on your table. It, however, offers an additional benefit. It provides an advantage unique to family owned businesses. It allows an exciting way to take on those who seek to wrest your children from you. In doing so, you can take back your children even before they leave the house. But that's not all you can take back. If you do this right, you can take back some of the money you've been giving every year to the government, taxes. What's more, you'll use those savings to help your children retire as tax-free multimillionaires. In fact, you can set them on the road to a comfortable retirement well before it's time for you to retire, and well before you need to take that exit strategy you're not even sure will be there when you're ready for it. Heck, if your kids are set, you won't need that exit strategy. You can rest, relax without worry in retirement. After all, if your kids are financially independent, you don't have to worry about wasting your hard-earned retirement money on your adult children. Regardless, though, you don't have to rely on the future that you can't control. Instead, you can capitalize on the today you can. You can reduce your tax bill, help give your kids an edge their peers won't have. And who knows, you might just get them interested enough in what you do every day to keep them down on the farm. And that alone will make all those hard, long hours running your family business, it'll make it all worthwhile. Why? Because in the end, it's all about family, isn't it? That's really what you're working with. All about family. Now, what what does this mean in terms of the Child IRA? How could you actually utilize the Child IRA to help bring your kids in? Well, the idea is really simple, is that you want to bring your children into the business really before they're even aware of the business. And that's why putting your 2-year old on a payroll, and it doesn't have to be 2, but that's just the number that we can work with. That's why it's conceptually an important thing to consider. But before we talk about that, putting them on your payroll, what if you don't own a business? How can you do this? Can you still do this? The answer is yes. It's a little bit more difficult, a little bit more of a challenge. You'll actually have to work on it. And maybe, in effect, by doing it, you will set up sort of a side hustle or a side business, if you will, in order to accomplish it. Let's talk about that. And a lot of it has to do with, again, we go back to child labor laws, which are federal laws and state laws. So you're going to need to talk to somebody who's an expert in child labor laws in your state to figure out how to do this. You're going to want to pay reasonable wages. And if you have your own business, a lot of this will depend on your ownership structure. Well, the idea that you want to set this thing up and help you really set up the child labor laws, so that, not the child labor laws, but the business, so that you can utilize this. It can't be a C corp. It has to be a certain kind of business. S corps, I don't think work either. It could be just a sole proprietorship, maybe a partnership. This is where you need to talk now to a tax accountant, a tax advisor, somebody who's expert not only in the federal taxes but also in your state taxes. You're going to have to learn from them to see what it is that you can do to bring your child aboard your business. So we're going to be talking about this in 2 ways really quick, just because we have to wrap up on time. But the first way is uh, the idea that you don't have your own business. Okay, what is it that you're going to do if you don't have your own business? Well, you're going to want to have your child become a model. How do these little kids who do diaper commercials get paid? Well, they get paid because they're models. And your child can become a model. Not very difficult to do that. It does require some work, though, not just on the part of your child, but on your part also. So you have to be prepared for that. And if you had a model, a child model, by the way, in New York State, babies as young as a couple weeks old can be child models, and it is possible to do this. So here's the risk, and I've interviewed modeling agencies about this for the books that I wrote to see what the risks are with babies being models or young children being models. There's generally a sweet spot of just a couple of years, I should say, 2 to 4 years, before the child ages out as being a prime model. So, very seldom do you see children be models from the point of their babies all the way to 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, their entire life. It's possible, but it's very rare. So if you've got a child baby model, they're only going to be able to be working for a few years. So let's start off with the idea that the child is working at age 2. At age 2 and age 3, the child makes $6,500 a year in modeling. Now, remember I said reasonable wages. How much does a child model make? It depends on where you live. So you need to see where that is. And roughly it's about $500 a sitting. So this means that there's one sitting per month. 12 times a year you have sittings, and that'll generate enough money to earn $6,500, which is what you will invest only at ages 2 and 3. Because by age 4, the child is no longer model materials. So if you do that in a child IRA, again, you're a bad investor. You're earning 3% less than the average. The child will end up with in excess of $2.5 million by the time they retire. That's just for 2 years of toddler modeling. That's pretty amazing. Now let's bring it up to the other normal, and that is, let's say that you can extend it to 4 years. So here you want to say maybe reduce the number of appearances by half. So you're only investing or contributing about a little over $3,000 a year into the Child IRA, but you're now doing it for 4 years, 2, 3, 4, and 5, those years. And again, after age 5, you do nothing more. What does the child end up with? Again, this is $2.25 million. So it is possible that you're going to have a multimillionaire as a child, through a child IRA, by allowing them to invest at a very young age or contribute to a child IRA at a very young age. And that is something that maybe every parent ought to be looking at. But let's just make sure that we are going to talk about the restrictions that you have, and that is that the idea that you've got a child IRA and you're using it really requires you, if it's going to be a non-child IRA, you're going to have to talk to a tax accountant. You're going to have to talk to a child labor expert. If you have your own business, there's additional tax. So that you've got to bring these people in. None of this, by the way, is about investment. It's only about taxes and child labor law. You can do it. You can find the answer. Don't cut corners, though. If you cut corners, you can get in trouble. You don't want to get in trouble. This is too good an idea to fail to cross a T and dot an I. I guess you can cross it. That would make it a T. So you wanna really kind of talk to the right people about doing this. So that's all really I have to talk about today. Thanks for being here. I didn't get a chance to answer all your questions, but in the course of the presentation, I think I was able to address most of the questions that you've had. Again, if you've got more information, or if you'd like to get more information on this, then you're going to have to go and talk to an expert. You could go and probably get some information that from the website that we have, which is childira.com. I don't have that on the screen. Sorry about that. But I will say this, that, I'll just put this for more information if you want more. Child IRA. Get it there. Now, if you enjoy asking questions to our guests or our speakers, whoever they may be, you can do that. Feel free to do that. All you need to do is go to our website, which is stateof.greaterwestnewyork.com, and you can sign up to be a member of the live audience that gets an invitation every Thursday morning to watch this show that appears at noon Thursdays. I realize a lot of people have to work during that time. That's cool. If you want to watch the show on the site, just go to stateofgreaterwestnewyork.com and you can see the show when it's archived in the afternoon after it's broadcast. Or you can like our Facebook page or subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you'll be able to see the show when it's rebroadcast every Sunday at 1:30. So that's all for today. Thanks again for watching, and think of the children. We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye for now.